Hey, if this is your first time with us, we are continuing a collection of messages we call The Power of Rhythms, which is rhythm is a strong, repeated movement of sound. And so for us, we believe that if you create habits and establish habits in your life, going into this new year, and this new decade, if you begin and establish new habits in your life, we believe that those habits can become a rhythm and that eventually can become a repetition and become a movement that really makes it different in your life with lasting impact. And so for us, we've given you so far 2 rhythms that we believe if you incorporate today and become a rhythm eventually in your life, that habit become a rhythm in your life, it could bring lasting change to your life. And so that habit that we've talked about first, number 1, you remember what it is? Okay. Pay attention to the tension. That's right. We got 2 people. That's awesome, right? Pay attention to the tension. And we talked about how that, man, it's so important that us as people, we pay attention to the decisions that we make in our life. Before making a decision, there's always a tension that you're going to wrestle with. If there's anything that dings your conscience is in any way, stop and pay attention to that tension. Because oftentimes, remember, right, the decision that we make, when we get going, we make that decision, it's always a first step towards a journey, right? And that journey eventually, right, because every pattern begins with the first line, right? And every journey begins with the first step. And every habit begins for the first time. And so it's really important that when you make a decision, you pay attention to that tension so you don't make a decision that you look back and you regret your decisions and you end up becoming your worst own enemy. And so that was habit number 1, was pay attention to the tension. And then habit number 2 was pay attention to your narrative. Pay attention to your narrative. It's really important. It's really important is that you tell yourself some things. You might not be the best of salesmen, right? But, man, you'll sell yourself on a bad idea really quick. Right? You'll talk yourself into this new thing, into this idea, where she said, he said, culture's saying, everybody's saying this, right? And you're just selling, and you're selling yourself into this bad idea. But it's important that we pay attention to our narratives. And then our last habit that we're going to introduce in just a moment, before I do, I want to share a story. Our last habit that we're going to introduce, actually, I'm not going to tell you because I just said I'm going to tell you a story. Paul that we're talking about today, his name is Paul the Apostle. In fact, you and I would not be here today in this room. Most of you, if those of you who are Christians, you would not be here in this room if Paul the Apostle didn't do what he did. You know what he did? He planted tons and tons of churches. And as a result of that, it's echoed all over the world, right? Thousands of years ago. The reason why we could step into a place like this is because Paul started multiple churches. And so Paul the Apostle started churches all over the world, and that's resulted in us coming to know Jesus and knowing God. And Paul talks about this idea of doing something, right? You've probably all heard this, right? Here's the TED Talk form of what he said. You've probably heard this phrase before. Successful people do consistently what other people do occasionally, maybe. Right? Successful people do consistently what other people do occasionally. How many of you know that this part is really easy to dream of, right? It's really easy to dream of the person that you want to become, right? Maybe it's a habit that you want to form. You want to get in the gym more, right? Maybe you have a desire to have some type of fashion. This is the best wardrobe of fashion I have in my closet, okay? So forgive me if this is not up to par for you. Maybe someday you want to be the best business professional, okay? I know some people in here that are killing it in the business world, in the nonprofit world as well. Maybe that's you. Maybe you want to get to the point in your life where you can become financially free, that you can travel all over the world, right? Maybe that's you, right? So successful people, it's really easy to dream of what this looks like. Successful people do consistently, but how many of you know, come on, right? This part is a lot more difficult, right? To flesh out, to live out daily, right? To do consistently. And so there's a couple of books I want to give you before we jump into it. There's a couple of books that I've read, and I think maybe you should probably add to your list as well. The Compound Effect, this is a really good book. This is one that my kids will read, okay? The Power of Habit, just recently read that. I know of a couple people in our church that just read this as well. This is a really good book. Some of the principles that I've talked about in the past couple weeks kind of address some of the stuff you see in there, and Atomic Habits. I haven't read that one, but someone on our team, Dallas, I think it was, have read this book. He sent me some quotes about it. It's a good book from what I can tell. I haven't read it, though. You have to ask Dallas. But these are some good books. And so successful people do consistently what other people do occasionally, which it's difficult to do consistently, is it not? Right? It's difficult. We're just being real, right? Successful people do consistently what other people do occasionally. And Paul talks about this idea of like how I want to do, but I don't do it. And he just doesn't understand himself. In fact, he says, I do not understand what I do. Anybody like that? Your hand raised, right? In another version, he says it this way. He says, I don't really understand myself. Right? There's some things I want to do, right? I want to get in the gym more. I want to set myself for financial success, to become free. I want to travel more. I want to become a good business professional, right? I've tailored my life around this. I've built some structures in my life, some systems in my life to help me get here. I want to become the most hip person in the world like Dallas, right? I want to get here someday, right? He says, I just don't really understand myself. I try to, but I just don't do it. So he says, I do not understand what I do. But then he goes on. He says, for what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good. The law is anything. The law could be the Bible, right? Or the law could be whatever religion that you come from, law, right? Or the law could be any law in society, the civil laws that you and I know are aware of, right? The law could be your internal narrative that you tell yourself, right? Look, I don't know you, but here's what I know about you, is that you have guidelines of what to do or what not to do that speak into your life. We all do. And that law guides your conscience and guides your decision and guides everything about you. So it says, and for what I have desire to do, what is good, but I cannot carry it out. Don't raise your hand, okay? For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. Come on. Right? He gives this description of his experience with doing consistently. And he's just not fleshing it out the way that he wants it to, the way that he wants it to look like. He's not living it out. He's not doing consistently. And so he gives this description of his experience, but then he also gives a solution of why he thinks he does this and how we can move forward. Now, depending on your background, you might not agree with what Paul has to say about his solution. But we can all agree with this part of the Bible, can't we? Sorry, go back. With this part of the Bible, right? For I cannot carry it out. We can agree with this part, and wherever you are when it comes to the Bible and religion and stuff like that, look, we can all agree with this part of it, right? At least you can relate to it. And Paul says, look, you might not agree with his solution, but I would consider you, again, this is just one man's solution to his problem, to his dilemma that you and I all can relate to. Because we can relate to his dilemma, his experience, I would consider you just to maybe relate to his solution as well, and to maybe even buy in and consider his solution. So really the question comes down to this. How do we, or why don't we just do what we're supposed to do? Why is that? Right? Or a better question, how do we do life when we don't do what we know to do? Right? How do we move forward? How do we live with that when we don't measure up to our own standards? Right? Because you have a picture of what you want to be, what you want to become, but how do we live in this transition, in this in-between of becoming the person that you know you want to be? And why don't we just do what we're supposed to do? Before we started the church, we did what's called like startup parties. A startup party is a once-a-month event that we did with free food, free coffee in local coffee shops. Come on, somebody, right? You should have been there. In fact, you should have been there. So we started this, we did like, is Tertulia coffee shop and a couple other coffee shops. We did once a month starter parties. It was a big deal. Like we spend money, food, coffee, bring people in, like tell our friends, tell our family, invite them to church, right? Or to the starter party. And so they would come to the starter party. We did about 5 of them. And so before doing that, though, I wanted to have this really bright idea. It's a good idea, I thought. It was a good idea to build like these stations, 4 stations that kind of communicate like our vision for the church and for Oakland, okay? It was to know God, find community, discover your purpose, and make a difference. We want people to know God through a weekend service like this, to find community by joining a life group, and discovering their purpose by attending Activate. How many of you been to Activate? Yeah? It's awesome, isn't it? Right? Attend Activate, and then also to make a difference by joining a dream team. It's what we call people who serve to make a difference. And so I want to communicate that through these like 4 stations I wanted to build. So I wanted to get plywood and just kind of build out these stations. And it was pretty awesome at the end of the day. Like the first one, Know God, was kind of like our sermon series I want to teach through. And then the second one was about life groups, was about like, there's a big map of the Bay Area. You get to take a pen and put it on the Bay Area of wherever you live, where you were coming from. People came from El Cerrito, from Concord, from Alameda, from Oakland, from Emerville, and they were just putting those little pins there. And then there was the third one, which is like discover your purpose and making a difference. And so I want to build all 3 of these stations. And so some of you who know me know this is not going to go well for me, right? So I went out to Home Depot because that's what I heard. I heard that if you want to build something, you go to Home Depot. And so I did. I found the closest Home Depot, which is a super long ways away from here. I got there. In fact, it wasn't just me. It was my friend Brando, one of our pastors here. I think he's in here somewhere, maybe not. Brando and I, we got to Home Depot. This was like, I think it was like a Saturday morning or something like that. We got a cart. It was awesome. So me and him, we're just walking around Home Depot, pushing our grocery cart, looking for wood or something. We went through a couple aisles like a dozen times. Like, we'll find something eventually. And we like walked past like the checkout section and like stared at like a dozen times. Like, man, we looked at the checkout section, looked at our cart, there's nothing in there. 45 minutes have gone by, there's nothing in there. And I'm like, hey, do you know? I don't know what to do. He's like, I don't know what to do. We look at each other. I was like, what do we do? Right? And so I decided to call a friend of mine. His name was Tori. Tori, he's really good with his hands. He had a toolbox. I've never seen one of those before. I called Tori. I said, dude, I started crying. I was like, look, man, Brandon and I have been here for like 45 minutes. We have nothing in our cart. Can you come help us, please? And he says, Akeem, go home. He says, go home, I'll meet you there tomorrow, and then we'll go to Home Depot and pick up some stuff. So I did. I went home. I obeyed. He met me at home, and we went over to Home Depot and picked up some stuff, and we were there for about 10 minutes, and we left. We built these stations. It's awesome. Worked out great. But why do I tell you that? Why do I share that story? It's because of this. Stay in your lane, okay? Just stay in your lane. But here's why. Here's I want to tell you a story. Because that also is a segue to our habit number 3. And it's this. Pay attention to your identity. Pay attention to your identity. That's not who I was. I can't build anything, okay? Don't invite me to your house with your kids to play with Legos. Look, I'm not going to build anything. Pay attention to your identity. If it's not you, stay in your lane. How many of you know that paying attention to your identity could save you so much trouble, save you so much heartache, save you so many regrets? In fact, I think most people don't know what their identity is. I think if we understood our identity, who you truly were made to be, it would shape everything about you. And here's what Paul says about your identity. He says this in the next verse. Paul says, you see, at just the right time when we were still powerless, right? Okay, right? I want to do this thing, but I just can't do it consistently. I want to develop these habits in my life that will set me up financially. I want to create this life that I want to become someone in my life that, man, if I can just have these habits that become a rhythm, if I can just do it consistently, man, I'll become the person that I know I'm supposed to be. Paul says, look, when you were still powerless, right, be able to start new things and stop old things, that power to do that, he says, when you were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Now, there's our first speed bump. Let me just walk you through that really quick before you get too offended. Okay? Ungodly, it's simple. It's really easy to understand. We wouldn't say today in our culture ungodly. We would say imperfect. So here it is. Okay, God is perfect. Okay, and you and I are imperfect. Let's change the preposition to unperfect. So God is perfect, and you are unperfect. So then you are unlike God. So you are ungodly. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. That's a reality. We're not perfect. And in fact, in any culture, in any religion, even is considered God a pure spirit, they would all say that, yeah, God's a spitting image of perfection. And we're not. So we're not perfect. So we're ungodly. We're ungodlike. So really quick before we move forward, I want you to find someone, preferably someone you don't know, and point to them and say, you're ungodly. Welcome to church. It's true, right? We're all on the same playing field. We're all on the same level. Look, we're all in, everybody in here, your first time, hey, you never come back. We're all ungodly. And so Paul says, look, that's just who we are. We're all ungodly. And so that's what he means by ungodly. But he says, what makes me ungodly? What is that? He goes on, he says this. He says, very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, right? That's true. Like, come on, you won't die for anybody. Rarely would you find someone who would say, yeah, I'll give my life for that person next to me. Rarely would give for a righteous person, but though for a good person, possibly someone might possibly dare to die. Every once in a while you'll find that person. He goes on to say, but God demonstrates his own love. Now, this is a different kind of love. It's not the love that's like conditional, like if you do for me, then I'll do for you. It's a different kind of love. He says, God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He says, look, doesn't matter who you are, your past sins, your present sins you're committing right now, just keep looking forward, okay? Sins you commit in the future, all of it. It says Christ died for us. Therefore, but really what makes me ungodly? He says, therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man. He says sin came into the world through one. What's this? Okay, so I'm ungodly, I'm not ungodly. You call me a sinner now? Yeah. So we're ungodly sinners. This is, okay, so why am I a sinner? Because sin entered into the world. How did sin come into the world? Well, he came in through one man. You know, who was? It was Adam. Adam. Can you guys see this? Adam is the one man that came into the world, and because of Adam, sin has entered into the world, and death through sin, and in this way, death came to all people. So on the heels of sin is death, and it came to all of us. We all experience sin. We all experience at some point of one another death. In fact, you know this. We've talked about this in the past couple of weeks, right? Death, right? Sin kills things. Right? Sin kills your relationships. Sin kills your finances. Right? If you have a bad habit that you're continually resourcing and financing, it'll kill your finances. And so sin came to all people because all have sinned. This is really important. He's not just talking about sin that like you commit and do. We're not sinners because of what we do. It's a different kind of thing. It's actually a noun. It's not a verb. He's talking about a different kind of sin. This is really important. He says, Adam because we're all created, right? Descendants of Adam. Again, this is just one man's take on this. You don't have to subscribe, but I'm just saying this is a good take in my opinion. Adam is a sinner. Sin came into the world because of Adam. And so because of Adam, we, in some cases, were all put into Adam. But we're related to Adam in some way. And so we all have sinned. So I'll go first. I'm a sinner, I promise. I'm a sinner. So I've sinned, okay? This is Jamie, my sweet wife. Okay, let's put her right here, actually. Just trying to get some brownie points. Okay, so I've sinned. Some of you have kids? Yeah? You already know then, right? They're sinners, right? President Trump, President Obama, he's a sinner, okay? Your best friend, they're all sinners, right? So we've all sinned. In fact, he would say, not just the people you know, he says, the people that you don't even know. He says, let's see if we can get them all in here. He said, we've all sinned just because of what Adam has done, because Adam is a sinner, and we were all in some way made in the shape and the image of Adam. And so because we've all sinned. All right, honey, you got to go in, okay? I got to be honest. So we've all sinned. And so he says, because death came unto all people, and then all have sinned. But it continues to go on. He says, but the gift, this is different. It's not like the trespass, okay? The gift is not like the trespass. It doesn't condemn like the trespass does. I remember, I can think about last month, but I'm talking about a couple years ago when I was in Vegas. Anybody ever got a ticket before? Yeah, I feel for you. I got 3 of them in the past couple months because I parked at one of the meters, and I came out late, like 5 minutes late, no grace whatsoever, and I had to pay for my ticket. And so, if you've ever, I was in UNLV in Las Vegas, it's where the Rebels play basketball, and every Monday I used to go play basketball up there at the Thomas and Mack Center. That's what it's called. And so I would park my car in the student section. You weren't supposed to do that, but I did. And so I parked my car. I knew that was against the law, that you weren't supposed to do that. But when I did that, what would happen is that I would come out and I get a ticket. And I did it one time. I got a ticket. In fact, the ticket was $45, and I forgot to pay the ticket, and it added up. So he says, this is what it means. The gift is not like the trespass. For if the many died by the trespass of the one man, watch this, how much more did God's grace and the gift that came by the grace of the one man, which is Jesus Christ. You see, Adam sinned, and because of Adam's sin, we are all in the same boat as Adam. We're all ungodly. We've all sinned, and because of we all sin, death passed upon all men because all have sinned. How do you know you're a sinner? How do you know? Because we're dying. Because we hurt the you next to you. Because you do things that hurt you. I do things that hurt me. Right? We've talked about this the past couple weeks, right? What is sin? Sin is anything that hurts you or the you next to you, or the you beside you, or the you that you're raising, the you that you live with, or the you that you work with, right? It says, for all have sinned, and because we're all sinners, there's a punishment for that. There's consequences, right? There's death in our life. Things result in our life that oftentimes it hurts us. Perhaps maybe you've been in a situation when you held a newborn baby, and that baby had some type of disease because of the decision that a mother had made. Unfortunate. But because of the relationship there between that baby and the mother, the baby carried that disease. It's unfortunate, but it's true, right? It's unfortunate, but it's true, right? You're not a sinner because of what you do. You're a sinner because of who you're related with. It's unfair. Yeah, I know it's unfair. But it doesn't make it not true. He says, but how much more, though, did God's grace and the gift came by the grace of one man, Jesus Christ. For just as through, watch this, for just as through the disobedience of one man, the many, okay, Adam, the many were made sinners, so also through the obedience of one man, the many were made righteous. So he says, this is my S, by the way, the S word, okay? Sin. And this is all of us in Adam. He says, yeah, the disobedience of one man, yeah, made us all sinners, made us all in that same playing field. This is who we are. But at the end of the day, because of what Jesus has done for us on the cross, because he introduced something new, a new way of understanding God, a new way of seeing God, a new way of coming into relationships, a new way of seeing the world, because of what Jesus has done, because we've done for us on the cross, it says, through his obedience of one man, the many were made righteous. And he says it's an overflow to many. In other words, what he's saying is this. Adam, who you were, is no longer true of you. This is who you were. This is your past. And even though you might still find yourself living in the past, come on, you know what I'm talking about. That's not your identity. That's not who you are anymore. In fact, that's what was true of you, but now I'm speaking life of what's true of you now. He says, you have a new life. You have a new master. You don't have to hold on to the things that you're holding on anymore. It's an overflow to many. And he says, where sin increased, grace increased all the more. It doesn't matter your past. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter what you've done. The best is ahead for you. The best is ahead for you. Because Jesus came into the world to introduce something brand new, something so new that if you give your life to it, if you come to the invitation of knowing who Jesus is, man, you'll find new life. This is who you were. In fact, my volunteers, can you come up right now at this time? Right? This is what you... Man, if I could only do consistently, if I could only be the most YouTube influencer, right? Young professional, man, I know where I want to be. I know where God wants me to be. I know what's best for my family, and I'm going to set myself up for success. And I know someday that I want to be able to retire and then travel the world. To be financially free, that I can only give back to my family, but give back to a nonprofit like this, or any nonprofit for that matter. This is what we're doing, right? The activity. This is really important that you don't miss this. The reason why perhaps we haven't been able to become the person that we're trying to be is because you and I have only dealt with these things as verbs, and that is a noun. And when Paul says that, hey, we're sinners, but that Jesus came to introduce something new as a grace overflow to many, he was trying to point us to our identity. And even though this is your inability, your activity that you can't really work out and flesh out all the time, even though this is what you're going through, you're trying to get rid of, or you're trying to stop, or you're trying to start, you're trying to get rid of these things, or you're trying to stop something or start something new, you're trying to become this person that you want to be, and you just don't flesh it out well because you've been dealing with the things as verbs and not as a noun. Jesus is trying to introduce us to something that is brand new. He doesn't want you to see you for what your failures are and your inabilities are. He wants you to see you the way he sees you, as what you are already becoming. You are already becoming that person that you dream of. You are already becoming the health nut that you're dreaming of. You're already becoming the young professional, the business. You're already becoming the person that you have dreamed of. But here's the best part about it. Even if you never become that person, even if you never work your hustle, even if you never get to the person that you want to become sometime in your life, even though God says, look, let us not become weary in well-doing. Hey, man, it's tough, right? In fact, the stat is, by Valentine's Day, 92% of people have already broken the New Year's resolutions. So 92% of you have already broken your New Year's resolution. It's likely. But God doesn't see you for your failures and your inactivity. He says, in other words, look, come to me. All you that are weary, and you will find rest for your souls. Even if you never become the person that you want to be. Even if it never comes to fruition, God says, look, at the end of the day, look, I see you for who you are. I see you because, look, I set my son for you. And in fact, this is not who you are anymore. This is who you are. Regardless of what you see in yourself, regardless of the habits that you still have that you're trying to put down to start back up, he says, I see you because you are now in Jesus. And let me encourage you to see you the way God sees you. And so for the past 2 weeks, I've given you a commitment. Here's the next one. I will remind me of who God sees and what I see, and not what I see. I will remind me of who God sees and not what I see. You guys can be seated. This is so important. I will remind me of who God sees and not what I see. Man, if we live here, what we see, if we live here, we'll never become. If we just live stuck in the past, stuck in our circumstances, stuck in our failures, stuck in our inabilities, stuck here, we'll never become the person that God wants us to be. And so let me encourage you to look. See you the way God sees you. Whatever that takes for you. If it's getting up in the morning and spending a little bit of time with Jesus, man, hey, I encourage you to do that. If it takes getting up in the morning and staring you in the mirror and say, look, that's not who I am, that's my past, and this is what God says about me. If it takes putting down some goals in your life, some win statements in your life that you look at every morning and you read and you spend some time and say, look, this is, I'm just I'm renewing my mind. This is what God says about me. This is not who I am. This is what God has for my future. It's bright. The best is ahead for me. Look, if that's what it takes, look, I would encourage you to do that. Because God sees you in his son. He doesn't see you here. He sees you here. For some of you, maybe you've never received Jesus. Maybe you're not here. Maybe you never decided to, look, I'm going to follow the life-giving narrative that Jesus has created and established in this world for me. I would encourage you to walk into step into that life and say, look, I'm going to follow Jesus. So come on, let's stand up together as I pray for you.